Cody Hofstetter is an expert in open source software, not to mention an expert in digital security. And he's given presentations before on digital security, but tonight he's going to talk about open source software. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing you because you'll do a better job, but I will go back over there and get your slides up and running. So take it away, Cody. Thank you.
So, how's everybody doing so far? Great. I personally was tired as hell this morning, and then I got a nice phone call after a long day, and was like, hey, by the way, our speaker just canceled. Can you come give us a talk? And I was like, which of the many that I have prepared would you like? So, luckily, you guys are a small group tonight, so you'll actually get all of your questions answered. If you want to, you can just yell them out at me as well. And if it's later on in the presentation, I will let you know, and if not, then I will answer your question right then. F5. All right, so this is why free and open source software makes business sense. And the reason being is because these are all tools that you can literally take home with you today. You can download them for free, which means that if you do not like them, you can uninstall them. So you have plenty of room to play around with them. So what we're going to do, we already did our introduction, so that's taken care of. What is FOSS, free and open source software? And then we're going to discuss it for both personal and business use. We'll have a little discussion too. You have something? All right, so about me. That's me, except for it's kind of more like this. And this is a little thing that I like to call from software pirate to freedom advocate. So, a famous quote from Einstein. Why the fuck am I doing this? That, for those of you who don't know, is actually one of the older Photoshop symbols. And that little dead dinosaur in there, I used the other program that I'm going to mention later on to crop that out and put it in. So, it's most important that you leave with value, information, networking, something that you can take away with you. So, since we already did the introductions, we're going to skip all that. What is free and open source software? It is all of these many, 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 many things. In simple terms, it never demands that you pay for it or for any future upgrades. That's the basis tenet of free and open source, because there is a difference between purely open source, meaning that you can look at what the code base is, and free and open source. If you aren't paying for the product, you are the product. Windows 10, you happen to be both. You get to pay for it, and then you get to pay to be advertised to, in addition to a couple other things that they collect on you. For the mobile platform, Bloatware, which is crap that you don't want pre-installed on your phone. Is there anybody in this room who actually bought a phone and it didn't have Bloatware on it? That was a no, by the way, for everybody who watches later. In the FOSS world, you donate and contribute only if you like the product. What this is actually running on right now is LibreOffice Impress, and we downloaded it right before this actually started. I donated when I used the version, and for this particular case, we didn't need to donate if you don't want to. So, people putting products out are the same people who are typically using them as well. And then we've got copyleft licenses, which, interestingly enough, the term copyleft is still a copyright license. So they're share-alike licenses. Because I know you all like to read, that's why I keep them nice and short so everybody can read them real quick. Share-alikes are modified works that are released under the same or a very similar license. So the GPL, which is the GNU public license, and Creative Commons are probably the two most common that you will encounter. By the way, for the GPL, it's typically software-based, and for Creative Commons, it's photos, media, things like that. RedHat and CentOS. Does anybody know what the difference between the two of these is, except for the one other guy who does cybersecurity? All right. There is actually no difference between them. And RedHat gives its product away 100% for free. 100%. So, how would a company that gives its product away for free make any money? Anyone want to take a guess? They make a product that is good and people want to contribute to. RedHat and CentOS are actually the exact same program. Both are given away for free. The only difference is that CentOS does not have RedHat's branding in it. Oh, I forgot I had this disclaimer in here. I own shares in RedHat too, so the last time I gave this, it was at a little technology conference. So I said if there's any RedHat guys in the audience, I'd like to see a dividend on their stock. So the very first one we're going to cover is GNU Linux. And it's like ice cream. There's literally a flavor for every single person. So whatever you like, I guarantee you will find something that you like for them. Zorin OS Core, which is very, very simple if you're coming from either a Mac or a Windows platform. And the reason being is because in the theming elements, you can actually choose whichever one you'd like. So it operates very similar, even though the backend is actually Linux-based. And then you have Ubuntu, Linux Mint, stable versions if you're introducing somebody purely to a Linux system. And then you have Arch Linux, which is bleeding edge. So if you are very deep into the technology field, then go ahead and feel free to play around with it. Because it's 100% customizable. You pretty much set up everything for yourself. And then for Windows in particular, if you want to create a live USB is something that does not actually touch the hard drive on your computer. So you put it on the USB, stick it in, it boots from the USB. You can play around with whatever distribution you would like, and it does not actually affect your hard drive. So you take it out, restart it, nothing's changed on your hard drive. I see you taking a note there. I'm just waiting to change it real quick. Would you grab her the mic?
Probably a stupid question, and the rest of you probably know the answer to this. Are all of these things you just showed operating systems?
No. So essentially, I'll just run back through them real quick. We're very, very brief into it. Everything on this one is actually stuff that we'll be covering. Literally the only two that I've covered so far, because we went through licensing, because everything is free and open source, it's important to know what the licensing behind it actually means. RedHat CentOS, yes, a distribution flavor of Linux. And GNU Linux, and since we're done, the next one, which is what is cross-platform. Because most of the products that we will be discussing are cross-platform.
Well, along with certain things too, like I've heard of RedHat. I don't even know what it is. I don't even know what CentOS is. I know Linux.
That's literally what I'm about to cover. So a cross-platform, which is a program that runs on all three of the major operating systems, which happens to be Windows, Mac, and Linux. If you are in the technology world, you are probably using some version of Linux or Windows. And a lot of people still like Mac for graphics design, all that fun sort of stuff. But those are essentially the three main operating systems. You also have other things like BSD, but we're not going to get into those. And most of the programs, as I mentioned, will be listed for all three of them. And if not, I will specifically make mention of it. So the first one we have is LibreOffice. These are the equivalents for what a Microsoft version would be. So the LibreOffice version of Word is called Writer. Calc is Excel, Impress is PowerPoint, Draw is Publisher, Base is Access. And by the way, like I said before, if you are paying for your Microsoft Office subscription, this is free, 100%, which means that you don't need to pay for an upgrade every 3 years for a new version of it. I'm going to repeat what her question was.
Yeah, repeat the question, please.
She asked if they have all the same feature set as Microsoft Office as well as LibreOffice. They actually have a full breakdown on their website, or if you want to look at their Wikipedia, of every single feature that is the same. Honestly, LibreOffice actually has more features than Microsoft Office typically does. But because most people are using some version of Microsoft Office in an enterprise environment, when you transfer documents back, because this is and honest to God, the only major flaw is because everyone else is using some version of Microsoft Office, make sure that you actually send them the versions in a Microsoft Office format as opposed to the, whatever open document format they have. And the way that you do that is you click File, Save As, and literally just select it.
I think you might have misunderstood my question. So I would imagine that it's the same, because I mean, like, there's Mac versions that are the same as whatever. So when you pay for Microsoft Office and you have your whole group and you can share files and, you know, like, so ours works as like a server. So our company email is in the Outlook and we can apply tasks and things like that. Does LibreOffice do the same thing? So if we were to, a new business is coming along and they're like, hey, what do I do? And I'm already the idiot paying for Office Business, right? Am I offering them this and it actually works the same and they can collaborate and things like that?
It's a cloud version, so yes. There are two ways, because it is free and open source. You can either get it from LibreOffice to host it for you, or you can actually host it in-house for yourself. So essentially, the issue with hosting files outside, like for HIPAA compliance, is that you need to make sure you know exactly where that data is going, which is why for HIPAA compliance, you can only put them so many places. You can't stick them in the closet in the back room and be like, yeah, that's fine. So yes, you can actually self-host them in-house yourself, or with other cloud providers, they end up going to Amazon, some sort of AWS server, or an Azure server from Microsoft, because those are honestly two of the major players. That answer your question? Perfect. So, this is actually the pricing for it. Office Home and Student 2016 is $150. Governments are and will continue moving towards FOSS and open standards. Quick side note, Microsoft is actually the one who designed the XML standard for it, and then they, in their newer versions, decided not to adhere to it. The reason being is because they didn't want cross-compatibility, because if you have an open product that is able to produce them the exact same way that you need them to be produced, guess what? You don't really need Office anymore. That's the very short version of that, and some politics stuff. Go ahead.
So I have a question for you. I do use LibreOffice from time to time, and it's to answer your question that basically has all the features you would probably want from Microsoft. But wouldn't it be easier if LibreOffice made their software just a web-based system instead of it being a download on your hard disk? And is that something being contemplated?
That's the cloud version.
What's that?
That's a cloud version.
Oh, there is a cloud version. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Although, something else that just reminded me of, one of the places in which I actually will not recommend this is specifically in accounting, and this is the reason why. Because Microsoft has so many different macros set up, and if you're an accounting firm, you probably have some very, very large custom macros set up, and they do not necessarily translate as well over into whatever version of Office you're going to be, whatever version of LibreOffice you're going to be using. Doesn't mean it's impossible if your macros aren't super in depth, but you might have to actually reset them up. So that's something to take into consideration.
Your second bullet about the governments are moving toward FOSS surprises me a little. I spent 25 years in the defense world, and one of the biggest issues they had was the use of free and open software from a security perspective, as well as from a rights or use rights perspective. Have they gotten through those two hurdles, or no?
So there's actually a new division of the government specifically designed to start releasing more and more software that the government uses into free and open source software. The government in Massachusetts is currently moving all towards the open document standard. And one of the other reasons the governments are doing this is because if you actually put up a barrier for people, that means that they can no longer participate in it. So if you have to pay to obtain software that you need to interact with your government, it is a bad system. That's why they end up doing that. As they actually continue to move more and more, the other issue for them is cost perspective. So if you happen to be paying millions of dollars for products and then you have to pay for these services on top of it, that means you're spending a lot of taxpayer money that isn't necessary to spend when another program will accomplish the exact same thing for you. Have another question?
Does that answer your question?
It does, but I'm not certain that it addresses the issues, but I can talk later.
So the project's long-term goal is to create a system that documents are linked through the cloud. By the way, this was originally set up in 2017. It's actually since been released. This talk I originally gave at the College of New Jersey. And according to their vision, certified professionals have the objective of extending the reach of the community into the corporate world. Kind of like I'm doing to you guys right now. That's why I keep them nice and short so everybody can read them quick. So we're going to move on. Scribus. It is an Adobe InDesign competitor. So if anybody uses InDesign for putting stuff together, books, anything like that, Scribus is essentially the free software competitor. Page layout, professional publishing. CMYK, that's actually color scheme, by the way, if anybody needs to know that. It's typically RGB or CMYK. If you are putting it to a publisher, they will most likely request it in CMYK. And it supports an ungodly number of
Tell us what CMYK stands for.
Crayon, whatever, yellow and something else. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. What do I look like? Clearly, I'm not a designer here.
It's a color description of colors, right? So
Yeah.
is this for creating a book with chapters and subchapters and an index and a footnote?
100%.
And all that sort of thing? Okay. There was another software package I used years ago called PageMaker. Was that it? No, anyway, that was a long time ago. Anyway, so that's what this does. That's a great tool. All right, thanks.
Obviously, I'm not the creative type. So, but what I do use quite often is GIMP. And the reason I use GIMP, it is an Adobe Photoshop competitor. Does anybody know what the last version of Adobe Photoshop was before they switched to their Creative Cloud? 6. So the reason that is important is because now with a Creative Cloud structure, they have moved to a subscription model, which means that you have to continuously pay them for every single new feature they put in. Yeah, right up until they start deciding that they're not going to have any backwards compatibility for it. All right, so like I said, the reason that it's from Software Pirate to Freedom Advocate, that lovely little Photoshop logo, I, many years ago, happened to use Photoshop. And the reason that I switched over into free software is because at one point I went to download their Creative Cloud version. And a lot of people don't know this, but you can actually get torrented software of pretty much whatever you want in cracked and/or trial versions. If you actually put firewalls up around them and you disallow them to talk to other things, you can maintain an activation without actually having it expire. It's
Remember the
only
disclaimers,
for upgrades.
everybody. Remember the disclaimers.
This is educational. That's why.
Question for you about GIMP. So I use GIMP, and I just want to emphasize the point that you made that if you sign up for the Adobe Creative Cloud service, if you stop paying for the Adobe Creative Cloud service, your the files that you've created are not open up. You can't open them. So my question to you is, does GIMP open up the files that are created by Adobe Creative Cloud?
Yes. I don't know if they do it directly now, but if they do not do it directly yet, there is a plugin that will open them for you. And there's a full plugin structure in GIMP too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So real quick, going back to that, essentially when I had Creative Cloud and I was downloading it and doing all that, I was like, you know what, this is really stupid. Why don't I literally just go download a program, since the only reason that I even am using Photoshop is to more or less crop and do other terribly simple things. Obviously, like I said, I'm not a lovely artist or creative person, so for that point, all I needed was very simple things. And this will, if you're not a professional, more than take care of every single thing that you need. And if you are a professional, there's people who use it for professional activities all the time. A lot of people, because they come and they are taught using Photoshop, that is why they're more comfortable with it. And Like I said, what do you guys use Photoshop for? Don't let my limited skills be your impression. Business cards. Perfect. You can, anything that you end up needing them for, right in GIMP, you can do them. The next one is Inkscape, which is the Adobe Illustrator competitor. And what Inkscape does is vector graphics. For those who are unfamiliar with vector graphics are mathematically drawn, which means that they will size appropriately whenever you move them up or down.
So in the case of GIMP and Inkscape, I don't know about the other packages, I use both of those. And if you want to learn how to use them, because they're not exactly trivial, there's an endless number of YouTube videos that will teach you anything you want to know about GIMP or Inkscape. So wanted to let everybody know that. I'm assuming, please tell us if you know otherwise, if such training videos are available for the other packages as well. Because if you don't know how to use them, they're pretty daunting.
They will all have some sort of documentation with them. It depends on how popular the actual program is. Pretty much everything in here you will be able to find a tutorial on. If you end up searching for other free software, they may or may not actually have very, very good documentation with them.
Vectorworks?
She said, can you use Inkscape besides for Vectorwork, correct?
For the same things you would use Vectorworks for. Like you're saying, it's an Illustrator competitor, but if it has vector graphics, would it also be Vectorworks is another one of those programs you have to just continuously pay for or you lose your work. So is this also
100% free, open source. It's literally designed to essentially be the free and open source competitor for Illustrator. So pretty much anything that you can do in Illustrator, you'll be able to do in Inkscape.
I think you missed my question. So Vectorworks is not Adobe related. It's not owned by Adobe.
No. Yep. So this overall, any single image, logo, anything that you see, you have raster graphics, which are essentially images. Raster graphics are images, which means that as you scale them up or down, they will lose pixels. Because vector graphics are mathematically drawn, scale them up and down doesn't matter. They are actually file types, if you will, as opposed to just a brand owned by someone. So raster graphics types would be like JPEGs, which are a lossless format, or PNG, which is not a lossless format.
The other advantage of a vector graphics versus a raster graphics is if you scale up a vector graphics and you look at the image in a zoom situation, you won't see the line pixelated. It's a perfect line. Whereas if you take a JPEG file, a raster graphics file, and enlarge it, you'll see that the line is pixelated because it's created in an entirely different way. So if you're planning to enlarge an image, or even for that matter shrink an image, you want to use vector graphics imaging software if you can. Lynn?
I have many files that are .ai files. Could I take them and import them into Inkscape if I wanted to manipulate them in some way?
Yes.
I could. All right. And what are the Inkscape files? What is it's a dot what?
Did somebody else just say something there?
Extension.
I actually don't use Inkscape that much, so I do not remember what the extension is, but again, because they happen to be compatible with things like that, you can typically move them back and forth.
And is this cloud-based also?
I don't believe they have a cloud-based version of it, but if you are running your own server from Amazon AWS or anything and you're putting software on it, you can put Inkscape there.
Lynn, why do you need to know what the extension is? What's the reason for that question? I mean, if you share the file with somebody else, that other person, I think, can open it in Illustrator. And if they can't, they can download Inkscape for free anyway. So that it works.
The thing with proprietary formats is that most of the time, whatever proprietary program you have will open them completely fine, but because the other way around, they make it difficult for open, free programs to open more proprietary formats because they're closed source. So, as Don mentioned earlier, JPEGs, PNGs, they distort as they're scaled because they're raster graphics, not vector graphics. Next one we have is credit. Is there another question?
So, like with Photoshop type images, it's usually JPEG, PNG, something like that. Vector, the common vector format is EPS. So no matter what program you're using, if you save it as an EPS, the EPS should open in any other vector program.
I can confirm it will open in Inkscape for the EPSs. All right, is anybody actually draw, or is anybody a good sketcher here? Because, I mean, like, if you want to see me draw something for you, it'll essentially be a stick figure. So this is actually made by artists who want to see affordable tools for everybody. This is essentially what you can use to make sketches if you are actually using any sort of graphics on the other side of that coin. And it's also a raster graphics editor. So we already covered that, which is exactly what raster graphics are. Just waiting for somebody to finish taking notes.
You're waiting for the slides to skip ahead?
No,
Okay.
I got it.
Okay.
All right, next we're going to go with Blender, which is a Google SketchUp competitor, so 3D modeling. And it supports the entirety of the 3D pipeline, which is literally everything. Those are all the different steps that actually go into 3D modeling.
So if you wanted to do a flow chart, for example, is that what you, would Blender be the tool for that?
There are definitely a lot of better tools because Blender is ridiculously complicated because it is so many features in it. There's a lovely saying that goes, one does not simply learn Blender because it's really complicated.
Okay.
But if you do actually do 3D models or any sort of animation stuff like that, that is what you use Blender for. So, again, it does video editing, but it's not recommended for beginners. There are a lot of other easier to use programs for it, such as OpenShot.
Use the mic, please.
Is this on? Oh. So with Blender, you can do custom 3D video graphics, titles, all that kind of stuff, and special effects. Okay.
If you were using Blender, you'd use it to create like 3D models for games, movies, things like that. Personally, I don't actually use any 3D modeling the majority of the time. So when I look at it, I'm like, that would be useful if I was actually in that industry. Which is why I'm trying to cover a very large industry, so at least someone can walk away with some piece of useful information regardless of what industry you're in. And as I mentioned, OpenShot, significantly easier to use for video editing. Much, much easier than Blender.
How does it compare with Camtasia?
Never used Camtasia, so I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Mike, go ahead, use the mic, please.
Would OpenShot be comparable to Adobe Premiere that you use through Creative Cloud?
So, for Premiere in particular, there is some of the features that will transfer over into OpenShot. But honestly, the best thing to do is figure out what features you actually use from Premiere and then just look for whatever false alternative is available to you, because some of them, like I mentioned, you can do everything in Blender, but if you are a beginner for it or if you do not use a lot of features, it does not make sense to actually use Blender to do something like that. It's going to be way easier to pick a different alternative, just like GIMP. The reason for me that I ended up using GIMP was because the only thing I was using Photoshop for at the time was to crop images. Why am I going to pay $100, $200, whatever it happens to be, when literally the only thing I needed to do was to crop images? It just doesn't make sense.
So the Adobe Premiere has an enormous collection of tools, not just for video editing, but also for audio editing. Do you know if OpenShot has both video and audio editing tools as well?
I believe OpenShot has a few audio editing tools, but you would probably use some sort of variation of a different audio editing program like Audacity, for example, to actually do all of your music editing or audio editing and then import them into OpenShot.
Yeah, Audacity is it's very, very good, but it's nowhere near as good as Premiere. Just FYI. Yeah, I use that as well.
Okay.
But we're going to give OpenShot a chance because the Adobe tools are expensive.
So OpenShot supports plenty of export functions, so depending on what you need your video in, you can pretty much do that. I don't think I actually have it in here, but there's another one called Handbrake that will essentially do any sort of video converting that you need, so you can pretty much output it into any format.
Yes, I use Handbrake also, and it does everything you just said. But it's not easy to set up.
No.
No, just to let you know.
You got to read the documentation for it.
Yeah, you need to watch a few videos for that one.
And it's cross-platform, so feel free to use it on Windows, Linux, Mac. Download it, play around with it. If you find it's too complicated, go ahead and uninstall it, because, you know, that's the fun thing about free software. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it, and you didn't pay for it. Next, we have Darktables, which is actually a really interesting program. So, creates the virtual Lightroom and Darkroom for photographers. And it does batch photo processing, because when you happen to be a photographer and you take 20,000 photos, you probably do not want to be editing all of those by hand. Except for it's only on Linux and Mac for now. So like I said, if anything's not cross-platform in particular, I will make mention of it. Next we have OBS. So this is a lovely, lovely program that if you are listening to any, and I pretty much do mean any podcaster, they are probably using OBS.
What does it do?
So, high performance real time, anytime you see like a Twitch stream, if you guys are familiar with that, any sort of processing where you have multiple people talking together, it essentially is able to splice all of the different lines in. So, live streaming, podcasts, all of those different things. And as you mentioned, there are an ungodly number of videos, so if you're looking for particular features, you can find a video on them.
So how different is this than the that other video editing tool that you mentioned before?
OpenShot is specifically designed for like smaller videos. You could use OBS in place of something like OpenShot, but again, because the OpenShot features are more limited, it's very useful for somebody who is a beginner, whereas OBS is something if you need to add in several different streams, if you need to overlay graphics at the same time, which is something that you would have to take several other steps in order to put them into OpenShot. So very, very simple. One would be like, let's say that you are live streaming something and you want to have your business logo in the corner. In OBS, you can actually have that image appear in your corner or wherever you want while you are broadcasting, and that will not move. If you were to do it in OpenShot, you would actually have to record everything beforehand, put everything together, and then put it out as a video.
So if you use Open Broadcaster to live stream an event, can you then go and use OpenShot to edit it post live, right?
100%.
Okay.
Next, we got our lovely mail client. I just saw one guy light up in the audience. That was great. So that's Thunderbird and K9. So Thunderbird, essentially a mail client, by the way, is something like, God, I'm totally blanking on the one for Microsoft right now. Exchange, there we go.
You mean Outlook, for example?
Yeah.
Okay.
So any sort of Exchange server, Outlook, they essentially pull all of your mail from multiple email accounts into a single place. Thunderbird, fantastic. K9 Mail is for Android only. And there are so many other ones that you can use. And they will integrate with your Microsoft servers as well if you actually need to pull your mail from them. Most of the mail clients, all you more or less do is you set up your username, password, and it will pull everything into a single folder.
So I was a Microsoft Outlook user for about 25 or 30 years.
I'm so sorry.
And I was a real staunch Microsoft Outlook user until a few months ago when it got to be so effing complicated to get something to work. And you call Microsoft help, you know, their technical support, their paid technical support from someplace in India or the Philippines or whatever. And at least in my case, after I can't count how many phone calls I had, they never could get it to work. I gave up. And believe me, for me to give up on Outlook was a big deal. And I switched to Gmail, the online, the cloud version of Gmail. It's trouble-free. It's free, or you could pay the business version, which is what I did, but it's only a few dollars a month.
It's not free. If you recall what we said earlier,
they read all your
product.
Yeah, I understand. They read all your emails, but it's integrated with everything else. So I'm not sure, other than the security issue, which I think is what you're referring to, how do these apps, these email clients compare to a Gmail client?
I actually do have a Gmail account that if anybody asks me to send them stuff, I will say, do you have a Gmail, or where will you be sending it from? Because if I have one side of that conversation in a Gmail account, it doesn't matter that I'm not using a Gmail account because you still have it, which means that Google has a copy of it. And I will not send you anything through the Gmail that is sensitive. So I will tell you to go get a different email account. That's how that works. Now, on the other hand, because I do have that Gmail account that I use for things that aren't important, I use Thunderbird to pull all of that mail down into my local machine, which means that I can immediately delete them off of the server inbox version, and they're essentially all on my local machine.
Now, do any of these hook to your mobile phone?
Yeah, I actually use K9 on my mobile phone, and it hooks into everything.
So how does it synchronize? How does it synchronize from your desktop to your mobile phone? It must go through some kind of a cloud situation, or how does that work?
So it will actually reach out to each of them individually. So all the different accounts, this is the way that most of them end up working for your email clients. If you have a central server, it goes to that server and synchronizes everything. Because I keep everything locally, it synchronizes it to my own local folders. So I am essentially the server instead of Google.
Yeah, actually, related to this is are you going to get to messaging in a few at all? Okay, we'll cover the messaging topic later.
Okay. So, Microsoft Outlook, by the way, $110. Another question?
If you're using this Thunderbird thing to put it on your computer, are you like running out of space? I mean, the number one thing that, look, I'm just saying you're saving it on your computer.
Okay.
Some of us don't like slow computers.
The access to storage nowadays for most people means that they will never hit a storage issue. Almost never, as an average user. For small, medium-sized businesses, you might need something that's a little higher, but most people, go ahead and look back through the past 10 years worth of stuff and just see if it exceeds 2 terabytes, because 2 terabytes is actually really cheap for a drive right now. And I would be really surprised if it did, unless you do like video editing or you're a photographer.
Crashed an email server, and it was really a lot to recover my entire company's files and put them somewhere. That's why I was asking. So this is definitely downloading onto somebody's hard drive.
You don't actually have to have it download directly to your hard drive. You can leave it where it doesn't actually immediately remove them from whatever server it is. That's just the way that I have mine set up, because I'm more comfortable having all of my emails secured with me as opposed to a cloud provider. So you could actually just leave all of your emails straight in Google or Outlook or whatever provider you have, and all it will do is actually synchronize them. So if you send the email from a Thunderbird client or a K9 client, It'll contact the server, say, hey, this is the information that I have, and send them out. That's the very simplified version of that.
Can you filter nicely using the Thunderbird and K9? Can you put normal attachments from Microsoft products or from some of your other open source software products? And does it have a good search engine if you're looking for something?
Yes, 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 and yes. I actually use the search feature in it very, very frequently because I do have to go through a lot of different stuff. And when you go to pull it out, the only thing I will mention when you go through like Thunderbird to do it, there are two different search bars. One of them means search every single email account you have, and then the other one means just search this email account. If you do not know which one you are searching, you'll be like, why can I not find this thing? It's because you're in the wrong one. Don't ask me how I know that because I've done it many, many times, and I'm like, where the hell did that go? Next, we have GNU Cash, which is actually an accounting program. So it does double entry bookkeeping. The reason that it is not going to necessarily be useful for people who are accountants is because almost every single thing is run on Quicken or QuickBooks or some version thereof, although they're similar. So if you are a small business, this is where I would recommend you get GNU Cash because you might not be able to afford an accountant with a brand new business. And even if you can, trust me, your accountant will like you much more if you're actually using something that they can look at.
Is GNU Cash safe? I know several people that are using this and they call frequently and they're like, hey, do you know how to use GNU Cash?
Could you speak closer to the mic, please?
A lot of people call and they say, hey, do you know how to use GNU Cash? I didn't even know this was a thing until people started calling to ask, but is it safe? Safe, because it's people's financials and they don't think about this kind of stuff and like how safe it is.
Yes, again, it's only as safe as the individual is with their information because it is a local program. It's not going anywhere, but if your security is terrible and your password is password, then it doesn't matter what's going to happen because you have terrible security hygiene. But on the other hand, it's useful for people who do need to do double entry bookkeeping, and there is a lot of documentation, but if you do not understand how to do double entry bookkeeping, you will have a problem trying to operate in GNU Cash. So it also does reports, graphing everything, scheduled transactions, and OFX support. So that actually means direct imports from your bank account. So if you want to have your bank statements downloaded directly into it, you can do that. Also, great program to learn on if you actually want to learn about double entry bookkeeping, because you will be reading a lot about it. If they have OFX support for it, then yes.
Repeat that question, please.
He said, can you download information from like mutual funds, ETFs, anything like that? And the answer is yes, if they support OFX.
And a follow-up to that question, how about connecting to banks? Because QuickBooks allows you, for example, to download your checkbook ledger, if you will, to QuickBooks, which is then distributed all throughout the ledger, so to speak. Does GNU Cash do the same thing?
Yes. Go on.
I know somebody's going to see this on the internet and they'll actually want to understand what you're talking about. So when you go into it won't auto pull the way that you're thinking about QuickBooks, how it'll just keep updating for you and be like, hey, I pulled that. It doesn't do that. But what you can do is you can go where you would normally go to. So if you're currently a QuickBooks user and you want to move to GNU Cash, you would just pull where the download is and where it says, oh, pick the QuickBooks Connect file or QuickBooks older than this, QuickBooks younger. On there, if they do it, it'll say OFX. That's the actual file type, and you can just pull it in.
Or the other versions that they typically export them in are .qif.
Do you use GNU
Does it
Cash?
take a QIF?
Yes, it does.
Do you use GNU Cash?
I don't use it regularly, but I am familiar with it because a lot of people have called for help with it. So.
That's cool. Thank you.
Start charging them to teach them. Next, we have OpenERM, electronic medical records. A lot of you probably don't know this, but all of your medical records are typically stored in some sort of proprietary format, which means that when you have to send your information over to another hospital that is not in their network, if that person does not actually have the same software, guess what? Either A, they can't read it, or B, they're now forced to go buy software from somewhere else. So, OpenERM has 30 supported languages, full data ownership, which means that you are the one who owns your data. I, interestingly enough, when I went to get some of my medical data from my doctor's office, had to sign a release form to release the data to myself. Weird. And it does patient demographics, scheduling, prescriptions, billing, reports, patient portal, blah, 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 blah. I actually just happened to talk to one of the CIOs for a very, very large network. And one of the main reasons that he said, and this is why I'm not going to say which one it was, is that the reason that they do not do this is because they do not want to share patient data amongst other hospitals, because that is how they make money. They don't want to share their patients, and they don't want other people knowing who their patients are. Any questions on that one? All right. And then we have Nextcloud. So Nextcloud is your own personal cloud deployment. The reason that I have Nextcloud on here and not OwnCloud, because the company had originally started as OwnCloud, OWN, is because Nextcloud, the group of developers essentially split. Nextcloud is the 100% free and open source forever. No difference between enterprise solutions and personal solutions, which means that if you want to do document collaboration or anything like that, you can spin up a Nextcloud server on AWS, any sort of cloud platform, because it is a cloud platform, and do all of your collaboration.
What does it do exactly? What's a paid equivalent?
Okay, so think about literally anything that you have on the cloud. And by that I mean anything that is not personally stored on your own computer.
Like Google Docs, for example.
Perfect example.
Okay.
That would be Nextcloud. Nextcloud is built to be a solution to have your own servers that does many different things. Google Docs is used for collaboration environments. You can set up, because it's actually modular, exactly what features you want out of Nextcloud.
And what's the storage limitation? Is there a storage limitation?
That purely depends, because if you are running your own server, that means that the only limitation is how big of that hard disk that you put in there. If you are paying them for it, then essentially for their hosting services, that means you are essentially bound by whatever their pricing model is.
So compared to Google Drive, the cost for Google Drive, I think I pay $2 a month for 100 gigabytes. I think that's it, something like that.
I run my own server, so honestly I have no idea how much it is, but I can't imagine it would be that far off if anybody knows. I imagine the pricing is going to be relatively within the same tier structure.
And security?
Yes, lots of security. So you can essentially do all of your secure document pushing, pulling, anything like that. It, again, depends on how you set them up, because if you understand what you are doing, there are no limitations for it. You can use their packages, so all it is essentially you click the button and it will put up the package for you, and you have that server right off the bat. The only thing that they reach into actually do on your services is they make sure that they push security updates to you, because nobody likes insecure systems. Also, I don't own any shares in them, but if I could, I would, because I definitely think that they will be a very large company. And next we have Nagios. So this is actually more so for large enterprise environments, because unless you're in a mid to large business, you're probably not going to be doing a lot of network monitoring. That also says all-seeing IT at the bottom there. So it's an IT management system and a monitoring suite. What that means is that it is useful to keep track of your IT assets. If you are a small 10-person business, for example, you probably know where all of your laptops are. Not necessary to keep track of it. If, on the other hand, you have a gigantic enterprise network and you have 5,000 devices on the network, this assists in actually finding and keeping track of them. And their objective is essentially to identify all of the problems before they actually arise. And then we have, somebody else want one of those questions? Or is it still right in there? All right, and the next is Dollybar. So it is a ERP and CRM that is an enterprise resource planner, and a CRM is customer relationship management. Now, the interesting thing about this is there are a lot of features that are put into it, but because it is more so an ERP than purely a CRM-based system, if you need enterprise resource planning, because it's essentially designed originally for warehouses and things where you have a lot of stuff to take care of and actually have customers who continuously put things in and out, it's useful in that scale. There are a lot of other easier CRMs to use if you need a CRM, even though it does do some of that.
What would an equivalent paid CRM be to Dollybar?
This isn't about paid programs, so I will tell you that some of the free ones happen to be Civi CRM. You can use, oh my God, honestly, just search it because you'll find so many different things that whatever you want for your particular one will be useful to you. I think Sugar actually is a free CRM as well that's very, very widely used. Sugar CRM. Sugar, SUGAR, GAR. And if you do happen to use Dollybar, make sure that you pick the less is more approach for the modules, because I swear to you, if you decide, oh yeah, I might need that in the future, you will be looking at stuff and being like, I have no idea what half of these things do. It's because you don't need them. And next we have Asterisk. Who has a Google Voice number? Anybody have a VoIP number from anybody else other than just your cell phone number? Any other VoIP, voice over internet protocol? Okay, so Asterisk is what powers all of the PBX system, VoIP gateways, conference servers, all that fun sort of stuff. If you encounter a system, it is probably one of two things, and they will probably almost always be something that is Asterisk-based or one of the other few large providers, because there aren't that many of them. And because Asterisk is free and open source software, if you want to implement your own gateway system, you can do that. Who gets those lovely annoying calls from random like telemarketers where they just sort of go, so yeah, okay. So interestingly enough, the thing that you can do is you can set up an Asterisk server to take all of your calls and use a whitelist service. So anybody who is a human who hears a message that says, hey, this is a whitelist service. If you are a human, push 1 and call back, and it will immediately go through, and this is the only time you'll have to do that. You will never, and I do mean never, receive another phone call that is a telemarketer that is automated, because it is waiting for something on the other end of the line to say hello or something. So when all of it hears it, if it doesn't push 1, which it won't do, then it's not going to be whitelisted in your service. Very, very simple way to actually just stop unwanted calls. Because if somebody says, oh, that's weird, and clicks 1, they'll never have to deal with it again because they're whitelisted. And whitelisting means that it will always accept that incoming call and immediately forward it on. For Asterisk?
Repeat the question, please.
He said, can you Google it and figure out how to set something like that up? And the answer is yes. Also, I didn't actually come up with that one originally. That one came from a guy named Steve Gibson. Great guy. If you like security podcasts or anything like that, go listen to his stuff. And then Asterisk now is the ISO image that will install Linux, Asterisk, free PBS, everything GUI, very, very simple to use. So what the ISO image is useful for is when we mentioned earlier the live USBs. If you want to play around with it before you actually install it on anything, download the image, create a live USB, and then play with it. And next we got encryption, because everybody loves encryption. That is Veracrypt. Normally this is where I would do a live demo, except for, we're going to skip that one this time. The issue with Veracrypt is that the containers you create or folders are limited by their initial size, because it is actually relatively hard if you create an encrypted container, put stuff inside of it, and then want to resize it. It's very difficult to not overwrite the things inside. It's not impossible, but it is very, very difficult. So for essentially what it is, they're limited by the initial size that you create them. And you can send containers via email as long as they are within the max file size limit of whatever server you are using. So if you happen to be wanting to send books to a business partner and you don't want Google or somebody else to have an unencrypted copy of your books, you can create a container, put your books in the container, and send the container to them instead.
So do you create the container on your local desktop?
Correct.
And using encryption, is it called encryption, the software? And then
the software itself is called Veracrypt. Encryption is just the general title for this one, because that's what we're doing. But the software is called
you end
Veracrypt.
up with a folder that contains an encrypted version of your file or files, and then you. But most email clients that I'm aware of won't send the folder; it'll send the file. So, are you making a distinction between a folder and a file?
So, Veracrypt is like if you imagine it's a treasure chest. You have to open the treasure chest up in order to get the stuff that's inside of it. So once you close the treasure chest, you're sending the treasure chest out. You're not actually sending the file itself. The files inside of Veracrypt are not encrypted. It's the container, aka the treasure chest, that is the encrypted/protected portion of it. So everything, once you open it, you can still see inside of it. Which is why if you send it to a business partner and you give them the password to open it, they are then able to open it. But during transit, or if it's stored somewhere else, it's going to be in an encrypted copy because it's inside of the treasure chest.
And you can have one of these 25 or 50 character passwords. I mean, there's no limit to that.
I'm not going to lie. There is still an issue with that, and that is even if you want to create a 120 character password, the other person on the other end of that line typically doesn't like that. And they have a hard time remembering where it is unless both of you are okay with that.
Well, are you going to get to a password manager?
Yeah.
Okay, because compared to LastPass, for example.
So, encrypted cloud storage, Dropbox, Google Drive, blah, blah, blah. Any of these that you want to use, you can actually take the free file size limit for whatever they are, create a single container that is that large, and literally just upload and send those back and forth. There is one slight issue, which is that when you go to open them, it will also take longer to open them the larger they are. Just something to keep in mind. So if you're sending simple Excel documents or anything like that back and forth, you might just want to make like a 10 megabyte container, not a like 3 gig container, because you're never going to get close to that stuff. And next we have Keypass, which is a password manager. So a password manager stores all the various passwords that you use. Out of every single security expert, one of the most often recommended things is password managers. Use a password manager, which is not what the average public thinks. But the reason being is because if they are all different, that means even if one service is compromised, the rest of them are not, which is very important. If you want to use the Android client, Keypass Droid, and if you want to use the iOS one, it's Mini Keypass. Neither of those are official clients, quote unquote, but it's because Keypass does not have an official client for those platforms, and those are essentially the unofficial de facto versions of them.
So how does Keypass compare to LastPass?
So, LastPass is actually $10 a month. I think that is still their pricing structure, if I remember. But the main difference is that LastPass is still stored not 100% locally. Keypass is a local machine, which means that you will have to open them up whenever you want to use your passwords. There are plugins that will enable you to have features that are similar to LastPass, but they are not built into it by default because Keypass is designed to be more secure. A local copy of it. You can put a copy of the database wherever you want, and you can have it do the things that are not secure, like automatically inputting into browser forms, but those are less secure features that are not built into it by default. So if you want those features, you got to put the plugins for it.
That a browser extension or not?
No, it is a program that you can put locally on your machine, but there are plugins that will help to integrate it with your browser so it can still provide the same functionality of LastPass without it actually being a database that is not directly stored on your machine. And next we have Signal. So, does anybody use Telegram, WhatsApp, Wicker, anything like that? Yeah? Okay. So, it is a secure messaging app. Encrypted communications, which means end-to-end, perfect forward secrecy. End-to-end means only the two endpoints. Perfect forward secrecy means that even if one of them is compromised, you can't get every single message that has ever been sent. And disappearing messages, which means that when you send somebody a message, it will actually disappear because it destroys the key that was used to read it. Doesn't mean that in 10 million years worth of decryption time, you couldn't find out what the key was for that message, but it makes them very difficult to use. Very much, by the way, unlike Snapchat, since most people think, oh, when you send something over Snapchat, it disappears. No, it doesn't. Otherwise, they wouldn't have huge leaks of photos everywhere.
So in the case of Signal, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard on the news over the weekend that when they collected the mobile phones from Michael Cohen, the guy who's in the news a lot lately, they discovered that a lot of his messaging was done by way of Signal. And according to the news, again, I'm just repeating what I heard, don't know if it's true or not, they were able to unencrypt or de-encrypt his Signal messages, and they now have that as evidence that they will bring to trial. So I was always under the impression that Signal was unbreakable because of the end-to-end encryption. According to the news, according to the FBI, it's not. It is breakable. What is the news incorrect, or what do you know about this?
I'm not sure what the story was, so I can't answer it, but I will tell you this. If you have the most secure password ever, if you have 10,000 characters and you have your machine open and I'm looking at it, it doesn't matter if it's secure because I can see it. My guess is that they probably have a copy of his phone, opened his phone up, and can see his encrypted communications. That would be my guess. Again, I don't know what the story is, but...
Yeah, that actually makes more sense because from everything I know, it is truly end-to-end secure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Again, that if your endpoint, which is your phone, is not secure, it doesn't matter if the transit between them is extremely secure, because if your endpoint's not, then it doesn't really matter.
Can the FBI break in the LastPass?
I'm sure they could.
Okay, well, that's nice to know.
The question is, have they already done it, and is it public knowledge yet? It's not a will something be broken into, it's a when.
By the way, remember a year or two ago, there was the FBI was trying to get into, or the Justice Department was trying to get into an iPhone, and Apple refused to give them the key to do that, and there was some unknown company that they hired to do that. That company was actually one of my clients in the past. It's an Israeli company. So if anybody wants to know that, let me know. And actually, you can go onto that company's website and get a tool that will allow you to open anybody's iPhone. Just saying, it's available. It's for free, actually.
That tool you're talking about is actually used very, very regularly in forensics work. Yeah, very. And Apple actually didn't say that they wouldn't give them the encryption key. They really said that we can't necessarily give it to you, but if you had come to us first, we would have given you the iCloud backup. Again, not having the stuff stored locally. So what would have happened is, since Apple has all of your stuff in the iCloud, if they had come to them first as opposed to trying to break it, they would have just given them the iCloud backup, which had the information in it. But because they waited too long, then it was essentially gone by that point. Also, Wicker, Telegram, WhatsApp, if anybody uses most of these things, they actually all implement the protocol that was designed by the guy who does Signal. His name's actually Moxie Marlinspike, just in case anybody wants to look him up. Another question?
Just a comment on Signal. I used it a little bit. It gives you the opportunity to invite the receiver into Signal, but it also allows you to send an unencrypted message. What's your feeling on using it like that? Would you ever?
I use it all the time like that. And the reason being is because not every single person will have Signal or even cares about it. Some sort of encrypted communication, because they go to the, oh, I have nothing to hide, so what does it matter if my communication is encrypted? Well, just because you essentially have freedom of speech and you are not using it does not mean that somebody else would not like it. Lots of different variations all along that sort of stream. All right, next one we have is F-Droid. It is a FOSS-like repo, like the Google Play Store, Apple Store, all that fun sort of stuff. If anybody ever sees Open Camera guys, these guys do an absolutely fantastic job, and I think they have literally the best camera app ever. Document viewers, all that fun sort of stuff. Dolly Droid, which essentially allows you to access Dolly Bar from your phone. Nextcloud client, so you can push, pull, receive things from your phone. PDF creators, in case you want to create PDF documents.
You're saying this will do the job that the $450...
No, it is a repo. It's a repository, which means that it collects all of these various programs. So if you want to download the clients for them, then you can do them through this repository. So for example, when you want something from the Google Play Store, if you go to the Google Play Store, Google knows that you have now downloaded that because that's where you got it from. So they keep track of you, they keep track of your ID, unless you're sideloading them, which most people aren't going to do. Then they know that you are using that, and they typically will send statistics back on what your usage of those apps are, so they can advertise to you better.
I was referring to the PDF creator.
Oh, the PDF creator is essentially just like
Adobe Acrobat.
Yeah, pretty much that's exactly what it is.
So the professional version of Adobe Acrobat these days is over $400. Does this replace that?
Go play around with it. This is literally from your phone, so like what I've used it for is to do small little ones. The one that I use on my Linux desktop is actually called Master PDF, and trust me, that thing will do any single thing with a PDF that you want it to. Like, the reason most people send you PDF documents is because they don't want you to alter them. You open that sucker up in there, you will alter whatever you want. All right, so we're about to wrap it up here. If you enjoyed one of them, go ahead and pick one of the projects, contribute to it. Code if you code stuff, dollars if you like the program, documentation if you find it lacking, and spread the word. Use some free and open source software. Thank you, guys. Closing points, use FOSS, tell everybody. And that is one of my emails if you would like to send it there, or we can send it to you through the meetup stuff.
All right. What's the origin of that email address? That was a bad dream, wasn't it?
So whenever you do a lot of security stuff, sometimes you end up having different handles that you want, or you use multiple aliases for things. Like if you have an email account, you only send to people you want to talk to. If you have an email account that you only talk to your family with, that would be essentially what that is. That actually is corrupted omnipotence. That's actually what that says. And then HH was for the first presentation that I gave this at. So that is one of the aliases that sends it through to one of my other emails.
Thank you very much, Cody. Are there any other questions? Does anybody have any questions?
Satisfied all your questions? Perfect.
So obviously, these tools require. Okay, so let me back up. The reason I like personally to use software that I pay for is based on the theory that if I ever have a problem, there's a phone number I can call and talk to somebody for help. With these tools, nothing like that. I assume there's no telephone support.
That's not true at all. It depends on what you are using because, like Red Hat, for example, they give their product away for free. They make their money by providing enterprise support. That's exactly where they make their money. So it depends on what tools you are actually using.
So you're saying some of these tools will offer support if you pay for the support. Pay for the support or pay for the tool? Or
pay for the support.
Okay.
So Nextcloud, for example, Nextcloud, if you want to go use it, they do not limit the features that you can implement inside of it. But if you actually need to send questions out to them, yes, they will answer them if they're anything basic. But if you have like something that is very, very in-depth or requires one of the developer's actual time, you can pay for support in order to actually have whatever answers you need. Another great way to do it is you can actually have features that you find useful implemented and pay for a feature to be created, and then every single other individual gets those features.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Anybody else have any questions? So you've given this presentation tonight, for which we are very grateful. How can you support folks in the audience who may have questions about the tools or how to use those tools? Do you offer consulting service to help people answer questions as to what tool to use and how to use it, how to install it, and so on? Is that something that you would do?
I do, and this presentation was originally designed for business consultation. By the way, this is literally the bare surface of everything. This is just to give you guys a taste so you can go explore them on your own. If you need support, you can either go to the forums first, which I always recommend, because if you are just learning something, go play around with it. That's going to be the easiest way to figure out what it does or it doesn't do. Now, that being said, if there is something that you really cannot figure out, yes, feel free to come email me, go to the forums, check them out. Sometimes the support is definitely necessary. Like I mentioned to the woman who was an accountant earlier, she said people keep calling her to ask her about GNU Cash. What I said was, yes, you should start charging people to teach them how to use GNU Cash. That is one of the other features. If you are making a transition from Microsoft Office products into LibreOffice, the reason that they have certified professionals who do transition is so that they can assist you in actually making those transitions. It's like learning any other piece of software.
Yeah, thank you. I may take you up on that. Nan, do you have a question? Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir, or ma'am, I can't see you. Yes, get to the microphone, please.
You had mentioned about, did you say LibreOffice?
I did.
Okay, yeah, because on my one Mac, I have Microsoft Office from 2009 or 2008, and I have LibreOffice, which I guess is an open source software. But it seems to have
Could you speak into the mic,
a lot of the
please?
properties that Microsoft has. The one thing I noticed is when I'm creating something like a resume and I save it in the preferred format, which is I think .odt. I know a lot of people that don't have that, but they have Microsoft Office, they can't open it up. So, but when you save it as a .dot or .x format, it seems like it changes the format, so I never know what to do.
You weren't here for that, but that is what I meant exactly when I said that Microsoft is the one who actually helped to design some of that format and then didn't actually adhere to it when they went through with it. The reason is because LibreOffice actually adheres to what the standard says. Microsoft Office does not, even though they're the ones who designed the standard. And if you have to send it to somebody, I recommend sending them in DOC as opposed to DOCX because it has better compatibility with the older versions than the newer ones. So yes, 100%. Or you can pull the other one, which is, hey, you know what? It's a free program, so go download it and you'll be able to read it completely fine. Because yes, formatting issues are definitely an issue with LibreOffice to Microsoft.
Repeat.
Yeah. By the way, what he actually
Repeat
just
his
mentioned.
comment or
Yeah.
question.
He happened to say that there was few issues with formatting and essentially saving them over to some of the other formats. Yes, 100%. Again, it's because they're actually adhering to the standard and Microsoft is not. He also said the other thing you can do is export them as a PDF document, which will 100% achieve exactly what you want. So if you want to send somebody a resume, as he mentioned, or something else, feel free to export them as a PDF document because that will 100% look the same. And if you need any sort of editing with it, you can also use something for GhostScript, which is essentially an interpreter for it, for PDF.
Would the PDF be a readable PDF, or would it be an image that is not readable? And just as an FYI, I wouldn't recommend using a PDF to submit resumes to the applicant tracking system.
Why?
Can't pull them out would be my guess. Harder to pull the information out.
It depends on whether or not it's an image or a readable PDF. But the parsers do have some challenges reading something that is highly formatted with lines and borders and columns and whatnot. You basically need to take your resume down to something like a TXT file. I don't like the looks of the TXT file, so I do it manually in Word, where I totally deconstruct it down to bare bones. So I wouldn't submit a resume in PDF.
I don't know what you mean by a parser. What is that? Tell us what that means.
The ATS, Applicant Tracking System, is a software that reads resumes. And what it does is it copies and pastes the information into little boxes in a database so that, company names go in company names and dates go in dates and job titles go in job titles and the accomplishments go in the accomplishment section. So what a parser does, and all these ATS systems differ, but the parser reads the resumes so that it will give a mathematical score for how well the job description matches the resume of the submitter. And it will read entire phrases, and that's something called contextualization. So it will look for the keywords, but it will also read the keywords before and after. So it reads that whole sentence, and it will give it a mathematical score. There are HR professionals who can put parameters on the ATS system and say, okay, I got 270 resumes that were at 95% or above match. So now I'm going to manually change it to 98% and above, and maybe it'll take it down to, 23 resumes or something like that. So even if you do have a very high match number with the mathematical score, your resume still may not be seen by human eyes. But if it can't be read, that's the biggest problem. It just goes in the black hole.
Well, I've never seen two resumes that are the same. So I can't, if there's such a thing as this parser software that you're talking about, if it wasn't designed to read every imaginable format of a resume, then I don't know who designed it. It's because every resume is different.
That's correct. And as well as the applicant tracking systems are all different. So that is actually the chapter I wrote in the book with Dick Bowles, the author of What Colors Your Parachute, was on the applicant tracking system. And my tips are very general in nature, just best practices, because I am not, analyzing each and everybody's software, and technology and software changes daily. So it's always best to err on the cautious side and use a deconstructed type of resume that can be read. You can't put any information in footers or headers. You don't want to put columns or anything like that.
And you're saying that these parsers are not designed to read PDF files?
They may not if it's an image, because a PDF can be an image or it could be a readable document. So, for example, if you go into LinkedIn and you save somebody's LinkedIn profile as a PDF, that is a readable PDF. So I can copy and paste things into a Word document. But if I were to go to your resume and I were to take a picture with my phone, that is a PDF image, so to speak, or an image, which is not readable.
You're using the word PDF image. It's really just an image.
Well, it's an image,
Okay.
but
That's
if you were going to scan it, for example, it would be an image
okay.
that you can't
Right.
manipulate.
I just thought of an extremely interesting project for some high school students and or college students who want to figure out how they're always going to get their resumes seen, by the way. If you have 100% on that, you will always show up, so figure that one out, guys.
You cannot copy and paste the job description at the end of the resume, because when it goes through the parser, even if you were to make it white, it comes out black on the other end, and then you look like you're a shady person.
If you understand how the parser is actually looking for keywords, you can actually put them and essentially manipulate the program however you want it to. That's actually the project that I'm specifically talking. You write the resume to the specifications of what the parser is looking for, not for random bits of information that would potentially be there. Because you could submit a resume that actually made absolutely no sense, but when it is given to the parser and the parser says, yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for, then you've essentially gamed the parser itself to put your...
So eventually you'll be sitting in front of a human, I assume, before you get hired, and they'll find you out
Which
at
is
that
the
point. But at
objective,
least
yeah.
you'll get in front of a human. That's the point, yeah.
Or if you really want to be good with it, actually learn some human skills and deliver your resume in person. Because I guarantee you that will be much more efficient unless you are sending out like 50,000 resumes.
There's so many ways around that,
Go on.
Lynn.
When I uploaded my resume to
Please get closer to the mic.
Sure. When I uploaded my resume to LinkedIn or Monster or any Glassdoor, I usually do it as a PDF so it retains the format. It seems to be readable or searchable because also I make sure I embed the fonts. And the only other image that's on there, and actually it's more of a button or a link, is my LinkedIn profile. So anybody could click on that and it'll take them right to my LinkedIn profile. Now, the thing is, I've been finding that I get emails, calls from recruiters, and I guess they must pull keywords from there. Now, the one thing I don't have on my resume is like my address, so anybody could think, well, I don't know where he is in the country. So inadvertently, I end up getting some incredible job opportunities, but they're like, in Ohio or something like that. So I just basically have to tell them where I'm located, unless I put that in my LinkedIn profile. But the other part of it is when they pull out the keywords, they may be in my resume, but somehow they seem to...
Real quick, do you have a specific question?
Yeah. What happens is it ends up becoming something that if there's an opportunity, because they see the one word in there, they think, well, you can do something like this because you're doing like content management systems as far as pharmaceutical and stuff. And I never know, like, is there some other way that I could put something in there that might be more specific? Because clearly when they're looking for candidates, it doesn't appear that they're reading over resumes. They just find a keyword and figure, oh, this person would be great for that.
This is exactly what you do. Call them, ask them what they're looking for and how they define their parameters. It will be significantly easier than actually trying to figure out how to game that particular system, because you have to understand that they are looking to hire somebody. They want it to be known. So call them up and ask them what exactly are they looking for? What keywords do they use to look for people?
And when you say call, who do you mean? Calling the recruiter?
Please get closer to the mic.
When you say calling, you're talking about calling the recruiter or?
If you have a particular job in mind that you're looking for,
Yeah.
call that person, call that company, and ask for whoever is the person who actually does the hiring, and just say, hey, I'm not going to be applying for you guys necessarily, but I'm interested in a very similar position. What are the things that you use to select your candidates?
Right. I mean, they usually are spot on with the particular skills, but there's more to it.
This is a perfect example of why you need to go deliver your resumes, because in technology, a lot of times you will get the HR department who is going through trying to hire into areas that they do not necessarily understand. A perfect example of this is when somebody asks for 20 years of Node.js experience. The reason that is an issue is because Node.js has not been around that long, which means that literally no one qualifies for that. But it is still something that we put on the resumes. So go find out. Go talk to people. Debatable.
I think, Lynn, we'll have to have a whole meeting just on this topic. Yeah, okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Well, I think we should give Cody a great round of applause. Thank you very much, Cody.